Hi everyone, this is our first video in the series looking at the Masterclass version of how to approach the reading assessment for Functional Skills English. Now this will help us to understand the key skills to tackle the reading section for both Level 1 and Level 2. We're going to go through it nice and slowly, work through it together and make sure that we can all approach the reading section to the best of our ability. So in the reading assessment, here are some of the things that you'll be assessed on. So the first thing is reading comprehension. So can you read something and understand what they're trying to communicate? Next is skimming and scanning. Now these are key skills that we develop as we read more and more. So skimming is enabling us to quickly read through a text and to understand what's going on. And scanning is where you need to select specific bits of data or information from the text. Next we have making inferences. So that is where we look at the key words and the tone that is being used by the writer, and we kind of try and read between the line to see the deeper picture that they're trying to create for us. Next we have understanding punctuation. Now even though this might not seem very important, it does come up quite often within the reading assessment. We need to understand the actual function of the punctuation, why it's used and how it will affect how the information is being read. Understanding synonyms. Now, if you're not too sure what we mean by this, synonyms is a really easy thing to think about. It is essentially words that actually mean very similar things or the same to other words, and we will look at that in more detail in the next few lessons. Understanding language. So this can be talking about language techniques, which generally speaking we stick to one acronym. However, if you look at some of the more recent exams, it is asking for quite a broader range of language, so that's going to be a really important one that we're going to focus on in a few of the lessons. And finally, identifying similarities and differences between texts on a similar topic. So if we take a typical reading assessment, you're going to have 2 or 3 texts depending on the actual exam board that you do this with. Towards the end of the assessment, you'll have questions that are slightly more difficult, where you'll need to make comparisons or identify similarities between the 2 or 3 texts that you've read. So before we move on, it's important to think about, did you know that all reading assessments will ask questions to test all of these skills? If you practice enough, you'll see that the same kind of questions come up time and again. And it's that kind of cliche really that the more you practice, the better you're going to be when it actually comes to the proper reading assessment. By the end of the lesson, you'll be able to recall the key skills needed for the reading assessment, understand how to approach source A, and apply your understanding to attempt the first part of the reading assessment. So we are doing this in sections. First of all, we're looking at source A. We will be uploading another video next week where we're looking at the next part of the reading assessment. Reading comprehension. We're going to be looking at 3 different texts that help practice all of the different types of questions that come up. When we're reading, remember to use the following skills. So as we mentioned before, skimming is very important. This is where you skim through the text to get an idea of the tone and the message of the writing. And then we've got scanning. So this is where you look through the text to draw out specific pieces of information relating to key questions. Now it's important to note before we move on that each exam actually differs ever so slightly depending on which exam board that you're actually studying with. For example, if you're with someone like Pearson or Edexcel, it's much more likely that you're going to have 3 texts, whereas something like City and Guilds, for example, generally you're going to have 2 texts to read. So a teacher's top tip, when you do get your reading assessment, you don't need to feel like you have to read all of the texts in one go. The first 10 questions are going to be on source A, then the next one should be on source B, and they're going to follow on and on like that. And the final questions should be a mixture of comparisons between all of the texts that you would have read. Read source A and be ready to respond to the first 10 practice questions. So if you want to download it, there'll be a link available in the description below. That way you can have the physical paper in front of you. Feel free to pause the video here and go through it at your own time. If you don't want to do that, we will start looking through the text together. However, you might need to pause and go back and keep doing this as we go through the first 10 questions. Read source A and attempt the comprehension questions that follow. So it says then, source A, pass first time with Dave. Are you fed up of spending all your hard-earned cash on driving lessons that seem to last a lifetime? Well, the solution is right here for you. If you join up to our intensive driving course by clicking on the link below, we'll be in touch with you before you can say ready steady, start your engines, not forgetting mirror signal manoeuvre first of course, and you will join thousands of happy learners who have learned with us and zoomed through their driving tests. Since 2020, Dave Smith has been at the forefront of teaching road safety. After working for over 20 years working as a highway traffic officer, Dave uses his experience to not only help students to pass quickly, but also make sure they can drive safely and responsibly. Dave's intensive course costs just £500 and comes with a guarantee that you'll pass within 25 lessons or get your next 10 lessons absolutely free. So what are you waiting for? Just look at what some of Dave's students have said and you'll leave all of your doubts in the rear mirror. Becca 2024 wrote, "Before I met Dave, I didn't even know which pedal was the brake and which one was the accelerator. Now, not only have I passed my test, but I've also been studying to be a mechanic." Terry Wills 04 wrote, "I've been struggling to learn how to drive for years. It wasn't until I met Dave that I realised it wasn't my fault. It was just a bad driving instructor. Couldn't thank him enough for all of his help." When you do get a reading assessment such as this, you think about the details that are included. So if you look at the bottom, we've got the link there with the actual website, and you've got that little box or the star or whatever you want to call it, where you've got that offer, which is supposed to stand out next to the rest of the information. All of this would have been included with a purpose, so it's important that you actually take note of these things in case they do actually ask you a question about them in the assessment. Comprehension questions. So using what you've just read, attempt the questions below. Again, if I've read it too fast, you can always pause the video or you can actually download the copy yourself using the link in the description. So number 1, what is the main purpose of source A? Number 2, what layout feature has been used to show readers how much the offer costs? Number 3, identify one way that the writer creates a sense of excitement. Number 4, where has the writer used informal language? Number 5, look at paragraph 1. What is meant by the term intensive? Number 6, look at source A. What is the purpose of brackets? Number 7, according to source A, why should learners have lessons with Dave? Number 8, look at source A. Where has the writer used a rhetorical question? Number 9, what can people do if they want to book a lesson or find out additional information? And our final one, number 10, select 2 phrases from the list below that are facts. So you could choose from Dave works as a traffic officer for 10 years. Source A is about the intensive driving course. The course costs £500. And finally, you'll leave all your doubts in the rear mirror. So again, if I've gone too fast, please feel free to pause the video, go back, check the text or download it, and that way you can start practicing some of these key questions for the reading assessment. All of these are actual real questions that have come from past assessments as well, so you will find the more that you practice that these kind of questions will come up time and time again. Class feedback. Check your understanding against the correct answers. So for number 1, the purpose of source A is to persuade people to book driving lessons with Dave. For number 2, if we think about what the actual question asked us, it said what layout feature has been used to show readers how much the offer costs. So we've got a box, a star, a speech bubble, etc. So that's where at the end of the page we had that kind of star type shape that went around the offer. Number 3 said identify one way the writer creates a sense of excitement. This was quite a difficult one in my mind. So examples may include, but are not limited to, pass first time with Dave with the exclamation mark there as well. If you've got any other ideas that you're not sure about, please do leave the comment below and I'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. Number 4, where has the writer used informal language? So if you think about informal language, this is the kind of language that we use in a more friendly setting. It isn't really something you'd expect in like a professional or work-related setting. So answers may include but are not limited to fed up. Again, if you've got other ideas, please feel free to share them as well. And number 5, what is meant by the term intensive? So again, this is really checking that you understand what some of these higher level words mean. That's where things like synonyms come in as well. So answers may include but are not limited to demanding, vigorous, or thorough. Number 6. So a very typical question that comes up. So what is the purpose of brackets? And brackets is to include additional information. Number 7. Answers may include but are not limited to. He has a lot of experience. He guarantees students will pass or get the next 10 lessons free. There are a number of people who have written positive reviews. All of those are good reasons why you should go to Dave for your driving lessons. Next, we're focusing on the rhetorical question. So you could say, are you fed up of spending all your hard-earned cash on driving lessons that seem to last a lifetime? Or you could have chosen, what are you waiting for? In order to access the actual offer, you said to click on the link below. As we said before, these typical things, if they've actually included them within the text, it means that they want you to actually identify them because they could come up in the actual test themselves. So number 10, Dave's worked as a traffic officer for 10 years is false. Source A is about an intensive driving course is true. The course costs £500 is true. And you'll leave all of your doubts in the rear view mirror is false because it's actually an opinion, not a fact. Reflection. Look back at the skills from the start of the lesson. I'd like you to consider which ones have we actually covered so far. So here are the list of the ones that we looked at. So first of all is reading comprehension. So hopefully you've been able to actually download the text, read through it in your own time and understood it, and then therefore it's going to make it easier to answer the questions. Skimming and scanning. So a lot of the questions would have asked you to actually scan and find out key information, such as why would you have a lesson with Dave, or how have we shown excitement? So you would have had to identify things like the exclamation mark and things like that. Making inferences. So we haven't really touched on that too much, so we're going to build on it more in the next lesson. Understanding punctuation. Again, they had things like the question about the purpose of brackets. Understanding synonyms. Haven't really touched on that at the moment. Understanding language. So we've understood what certain words mean. We've also started to think about language techniques. And identifying similarities and differences between texts on a similar topic. So we're not going to actually be able to do that until we start looking at source B, which will be in our next lesson. So it's really important that you keep hold of any information you have about text A. You're going to build on that, and then eventually you'll have a full reading assessment where you can understand how well you've done. Typically, if you study with things like City and Guilds, it will be out of 30 marks, and we're going to aim for 20 out of 30 as a minimum because that would be enough to gain you a pass. In our next lesson, we're going to be going over the following things. So we're going to recall the key skills needed for the reading assessment. We're going to understand the key features of a blog when we look at our source B. And then finally, we're going to apply our understanding to attempt the next 10 questions in the assessment paper. Now, if you need any additional support or help, the new videos will be added every single week. Alternatively, you can leave us a comment below or visit our partner channel, Bookworm Teaching, for more lessons and guidance on all things English. If you do have any difficulties, please do get in touch. It really is important that if you have any kind of issues or anything you want to be marked or anything you're unsure about, that we address it now before we actually approach the real assessment. All the best, guys, and thanks for all your work and support. Bye bye.